All right, so today we're going to move on to marketing, and we're going to be studying Francis Marion, who's the Swamp Fox, and how he used guerrilla warfare to essentially change the entire outlook of what America could have been. Just to get this going. So, our plan of attack today is to talk about the battlefield today and what the marketing environment looks like as a whole. Then we'll dive into who Francis Marion, or AKA the Swamp Fox, was and how he defeated British using only militia. Then we will talk about enemy mistakes or things that people do that we see on a regular basis that can really put you behind as a small business owner. And then the strategic cheat codes will give you the layout of how Francis Marion used guerrilla warfare and what we can learn from guerrilla marketing. So, guerrilla marketing is literally termed from guerrilla warfare because they use the same type of attack. I guess I probably should define what guerrilla marketing means, but I don't actually know the history of it besides that it was termed based on guerrilla warfare. So, then we'll make it operational. We'll give you a couple different ways. Why does it keep changing? A couple different ways that you can actually utilize this in your business. So, to talk about marketing today, I want to ask you guys, how many different ads do you think you saw within like the first couple hours of waking up this
I probably would have these days.
morning? So, you got to think about waking up. One of the first things I do, although I try not to do it, is check my phone. And so you're getting all sorts of spam emails that you got overnight. You've got social media, which somebody explained this to me, and now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it. But like every third post is an ad on Facebook. So you're getting pop up ads from there. You're getting push notifications and spam on your phone. Then you got TV, you get commercials, which they are now forcing you to watch, even though streaming is the new norm. So everywhere you turn, everything that I have on my desk is has a logo and something on it as a different advertisement, right? So the point is there's so much noise out there, and as I'm looking around, I've got stuff from Costco, Walmart, Best Buy. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have the marketing budget to try to keep up with those guys. And if you do have that marketing budget, you can probably turn this video off now and go hire 15 people that have a lot more experience than me. But this is more about how you can stay agile and focus on who you're trying to reach, so you don't have to compete with those guys head to head. Just like Francis Marion was fighting with, I think the quote from the Patriot was farmers with pitchforks against the entire British army. So just to keep going here, branding. So we talked about branding in the previous, or well, we started off with strategy, right? And so your strategy really sets up where you're fighting the battle. So we defined who our competitors were and how we can find weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses in their offering to try to narrow down who we're fighting. Then we talked about branding, which is really our why, or as we described it in the previous video, it's our promise to our customer. And both of those things have to carry through in your marketing and stay consistent. Otherwise, you're not doing branding right. So the way that you create really effective branding is continuing to say the same things the same way over and over and over. And that's how it gets stuck in people's minds. So with your marketing, this is how we actually move from just being strategic and having a great brand to actually talking about our business and promoting it much amongst our clients and telling them what our brand stands for. So we already talked a little bit about Francis Marion. I'll dive into more about who he was and how he founded the Army Rangers. And today's giants, Costco's, Best Buys, all of those people are equivalent to the British Army at the time, Francis Marion fighting with farmers and pitchforks. And then the last thing, because just to show you how this works from a completely different angle, as a commercial credit analyst, we talked about the 5 C's and how those break down into a business plan. And character and capacity are two of the biggest ones that we have to look at. We have control over those. And this helps build your character because it's promoting your brand and who you are. But it also, when we get to pro formas or projections or our P&L, whatever it is, this tells the analyst and the bankers how you're going to increase and make more money. So when I first started doing this book, I was required to do 100 interviews with people who had an influence over this type of material, and I did a survey with a bunch of bankers. Every single one of the I asked them what the biggest problem with business plans is that they see, and every single one of them came back and said, pro formas are bullshit. They don't make any sense. And the reason is because people think that I'm not smart enough to do math and realize that you're probably not going to increase your overhead margins 100% year over year by not doing no marketing. So as an analyst, I would look at your pro forma, and then to make sure that your pro forma makes sense, I would go back to your marketing section to see how you plan on finding new clients and expanding your business to justify the numbers on your pro forma or projections or however you want to describe it. So moving on. All right. Clayton dropped off. Moving on. Who was Francis Marion, aka the Swamp Fox? My dad was a historical like that. He loved studying history, and Swamp Fox was one of his favorite people. So I grew up learning a lot about Swamp Fox from a very young age. Also, I've got a couple friends, Ray from Ray Salsa, and then another good friend, Preston Porter. Both of them were in, I believe both. I know Preston was in Army. I think Ray was Army too.
Yeah, he was.
But when you bring up this guy to them, they get super excited because Preston said that they were actually given a book that Francis Marion wrote about guerrilla warfare, and they still utilize the tactics today. He said it's actually kind of funny because there's weird stuff in there. Weird because it doesn't make sense today. I can't remember any specifics, but either way, he wrote a book about how to perform guerrilla warfare, basically. Guerrilla warfare didn't start with Francis Marion. We talked about Genghis Khan last week. He utilized guerrilla warfare. The Nazis with Blitzkrieg used guerrilla warfare a lot. The Comanches used guerrilla warfare a lot. The Battle of Little Bighorn, that is a perfect example of guerrilla warfare. So it wasn't started by him, but he was the first one to bring it to the United States, and he was so catching spelling errors in my slide. So George Washington, at the time, it was the American Revolutionary War. So the British was invading us because we were sticking it to the man, the British Army, and trying to declare our own independence, right? So the British military was invading the United States. If you've seen the movie The Patriot, Mel Gibson's character is loosely based on Francis Marion. But if you think of the battles in those days, based off that movie or any other movie you've seen, they fought a gentleman's war where there were rules of engagement. And it was basically you guys met in a field, you lined up straight across from each other, and one side got to shoot, and then the other side got to shoot. And then I don't know how anybody had that type of self-discipline to just sit there and get shot. But that was how you fought back in their day. Francis Marion was tasked with taking over a militia group. And just to define militia, just in case, a militia group is a group of soldiers with no military training. So in the movie, they call them farmers with pitchforks because they were literally guys that I think in the movie they talk about, they had all fought in some battle at some point in time, but they weren't a cohesive military group. It was a bunch of people who lived in the swamp at this time, and they put them together. So he knew that he had no shot at meeting in a field and just exchanging fire with the British military. That it would have been suicide. So what he trained him to do is guerrilla warfare, where it's all about striking a specific target very fast, and then they would retreat. So in the movie, there was a scene where he has his two sons, and there's a supply line coming down a pathway, and Mel Gibson tells them to shoot the commanding officers first, which creates havoc. And then they would dive back into the woods so they couldn't find them. And then they would pop back up at a different station and start shooting the other soldiers. And it created absolute chaos because they didn't know how to fight against it. So it's all about surprise, speed, and psychological warfare because they didn't know that it's scared. They ended up calling him a ghost, or Francis Marion they called a fox because he was so sneaky. And what this did for the pre-America Revolution was it instilled confidence in the militia, and it created a bunch of controversy and chaos amongst the British groups, so everything started devolving for them. And in the movie, there's a quote called, it's aim small, miss small. And I love this quote. I used it even when I talked a lot about playing baseball, but I used it then because I was a pitcher. And if you just aim at the catcher, you're probably going to miss somewhere here, right? But if you aim at the catcher's glove, all of a sudden you decrease the amount that you can miss somewhere right in here. I took it to an extreme where I had my catcher put a little dot in the middle of his catcher's mitt, and I would aim at that because then I would probably miss somewhere around where his catcher's mitt was. And that's the same idea with this. You want to have a very small target because if you miss your target customer, you're still going to stay somewhere within the path, right?
So the whole idea around guerrilla warfare to guerrilla marketing is that it's unconventional.
It is.
And it is to attract and delight, if you will, your customers.
Yes, exactly. It's about standing out amongst the noise because I don't have the budget to compete against Bank of America or even Bank of Oklahoma. So I have to be a lot more strategic about where I put my marketing dollar. And in fact, if you use Facebook marketing, for example, Mindy, I think you have a little bit more experience in this than I do, but you can actually drill down into who you're targeting.
Right.
And if you don't do that and you put, $10 into an ad campaign, what's the likelihood that you're going to reach somebody who actually wants to buy your stuff versus if you drill down to it and get very specific about who you're trying to reach and put that same $10 into a marketing campaign, you're actually going to get your ads in front of people who want to buy your stuff.
Right. And I think Clayton has quite a bit of experience in that, honestly, in helping businesses target their ad spend.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. We really try to help them identify who the target audience is. And then we ask questions like, where do they hang out? What interests do they have? The tighter the market, the better the results. Like if some of my clients want to do a metro buy, you're talking 1.2 million people. Most of those ads, whether you do Facebook or YouTube or Bing or whatever, Instagram, they're going to be eaten up by the bigger population areas. The OKC Metro itself, for example, the Oklahoma City Met proper is going to get more impressions than say Shawnee is, or say Yukon is where I live. But if you were to just run your ads in Yukon and with the same budget targeting a smaller group of people in your target audience, you're going to have much better results. There's someone way more famous than me, Gary Vaynerchuk, that said basically if you would spend $5 a day for a month in your zip code, you would become very well known very rapidly, because if your target audience is in one particular town, you're going to get a much bigger bang for your buck than trying to reach everybody in the metro. So targeting is real important.
Yep. And that's exactly what Francis Marion did. He targeted the commanding officers because it was a very small target. So he would take them out, which would devolve the ranks so he could overthrow big armies, which is where the term guerrilla marketing comes from. All right. So we've talked a little bit about it. Fight the giants head on. I can't compete with some of the big guys in the market. I can't compete with Costco. I can't compete with Bank of America, those guys. So I have to be more precise. One of the biggest things that I see with, we talked a little bit about this in strategy and a little bit in branding, but one of the biggest problems I see with clients is they always want to start by undercutting the market. And where this comes in is you don't want to advertise that, hey, depending on the industry, I probably wouldn't advertise price at all, but that's industry specific. But it's all about, there's different ways that you can create marketing content, which I'm not the creative person, so I'm not going to dive into that. But you want to add value, not just compete on price. Then we talked a lot about targeting. We will go into that more in detail later on. But one of the biggest problems I see with small businesses is you ask them who their target customer is, and they just say, everybody. It's like, great. I understand that you want to work with a lot of different people because you're probably needing that type of income, but you'll actually make more money faster by being very specific about who you're looking for. And a funny story, when I started doing the interviews for this book, I interviewed a lady who I know you guys both know, and she hated target marketing because she had a couple clients that were so focused on their target customers, there were people that would go talk to them who didn't fit the specific parameters, but they could have been a client. And so we'll talk about how to navigate that as well. So it's not about just putting your blinders on and going down the road. It's about, this is the marketing. This is how I'm going to reach the people that I want to.
But I think, Rob, to that point, I mean, if you have people walking in the door that really aren't your ideal target, you need to ask some questions.
Exactly.
And how did they find you? Why did they come to you? Which kind of then can go back to your strategy and your branding as well, going, okay, I need to refine this, or maybe I have a larger target than what I thought. Because
Yes.
if I'm not reaching my ideal target that I initially set out, but I am reaching this, then maybe I need to dive into this group. Or if I truly if I only want to work in healthcare, right? But I'm getting all the ancillary gyms, but I really only had healthcare in my head as far as being urgent cares or hospitals. Well, I mean, a gym is a type of healthcare.
Yep.
Right? So it's a different subset. And so it's your opportunity really to go back and ask some questions like, why me?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I like to say this is like a science experiment, right? So in a good science experiment, you set your hypothesis, which is what you think will happen. You figure out ways to test it, which you should always be testing your marketing. And then you review what actually came out of it, right? And then you can go back and change your hypothesis. So much of marketing is trial and error. So you set your hypothesis, you figure out how to test your market, and then sometimes you're exactly right. There's either a market you didn't know existed, or you reach people that you never thought you could reach, or maybe you didn't even know about.
Well, I think a couple of things that makes me think about, that target, I do video marketing, I can do content marketing, I can do website. I mean, I could do something for everybody, but someone told me a long time ago, which I didn't follow their advice, obviously, that is get a vertical working. So, for example, if you want to work with, say, healthcare, specifically chiropractic, outpatient clinics, focus on seeing your outreach to those particular verticals, because, or say if you want to reach out to just do restaurants, the more, every time you get a new client, you learn more not only about their business, but you learn more about the industry. You learn about how their buying is, who their target audiences may be. So that makes you more skilled to go to the next person down the line. So all of a sudden you get 15, 20 in one vertical. All of a sudden you're the guy or the gal that does marketing for, say, attorneys or restaurants, whatever. The other thing is too, is a pet peeve with me, is like, think of the restaurant business, for example. Restaurants, we all go to restaurants, and only time they know who we are is basically, majority of them, probably 90% of the restaurants only know who we are by we make our payment through the credit card. What about at the point of service that they gave you a reason to fill out some data to say, hey, fill out this survey and we'll give you 5% off next time or whatever. Just some reason so you could capture more information, because you can retarget with those people all day long. But I think about some of the networking groups you and I go to. Not one of those restaurants, except for one of them, that does a real good job of, because I may want to bring my wife back. You may want to bring your kids, Rob, but they don't do anything else to retarget us, which to me is totally, because you have a captive audience. So many people don't see the customer in the door as part of the advertising. They just see him as a customer in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's something we said for repeat customers, right? We had gone to a restaurant we've been to a number of times. I mean, I have some dietary stuff, and so it's like there's only a certain number of restaurants I can go to, and so it's like, at what point do they just know our name?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe they don't have to know our order, but
Yeah.
like, shouldn't they know our name? We come here often enough. I mean, so it's your marketing needs to fit that, right? It makes people feel seen and that you truly are, you want to help them and you want to serve them.
Well, just to take your comment to an analyst perspective, repeat business is so much cheaper and should make it's so much cheaper to reach your repeat business rather than going out and constantly trying to find new business. And that should make up like 70 something percent of your revenue on a regular
Mm-hmm.
basis. You're absolutely right. Repeat business is key to staying profitable long term.
Yeah, and you don't know that because you're not going to scan your credit card processor to find out who those people are. At that point of sale, before they leave that door, you should gather some data on them so you know who they are.
Yep. All right. So the strategic cheat code, what we can learn from Francis Marion. It's all about, so one of the things that made Francis Marion so effective at this is because he lived in the environment that he was fighting in. So he lived in the swamps. He understood every back door, every little game trail, everything. So he knew exactly how to surprise these guys that had no idea where they were. The strategy chapter, we talked all about knowing your environment. So understanding who you're competing against and what their weapon was, right? This is the same thing. You want to understand the ins and outs of the industry and the market that you're presenting in, because you can find all of the blind spots from your competitors.
Just a comment right there is that I always tell people, particularly that are new to sales, new to marketing, new to advertising the business, play in your own playground first. Play in the playground that you know and people you feel comfortable with, because you know more about them because you were actually in that playground, basically.
Yep, and we'll get to that when we talk about beachhead markets. So that's a perfect example. Once you find the blind spots, so what made him so effective in his actual attack was that it was all about surprise and creativity. And so you need to do that with your marketing as well, because I mean, we just talked about how many ads we see in a short amount of time, first thing in the morning. So you need to do something that stands out away from those. And then aim small, miss small. So aim at a very specific target, a very specific type of customer, with the idea that if you focus on them, hopefully you hit somewhere around them and your dollar becomes a lot more powerful. And be agile. So one of the biggest advantages that we have as small business owners is the majority of the people I talk to are the decision makers on how the marketing campaign is going to go. But if you start talking to, I think the biggest marketing team I've ever worked with was like 10 people. And that was a pretty big marketing team. As you start getting up into like Walmart and some of these big companies, they have hundreds of people that are working on their marketing team. I don't know. I've never been in one of those rooms, but
Yes.
I mean, think of all the processes and procedures that have to go on to get a new campaign out. And so one of the biggest advantages we have as small business owners is we can pivot really fast. So play to your strengths, not to theirs. So their strength, the giants that we're talking about, their strength is that they have a lot bigger budget than I do. I don't know about you guys, but we can adapt quicker, we can do it smarter, and we can do it faster.
I would say the one caveat though is, I mean, you can copy what they're doing, right? But it has to be yours, right? Like
Yes.
when you know what they're doing is done well, copy it, make it yours, change it enough that it is yours. And I mean, the ad spend clearly is different just because of the machines behind it and not behind yours. But you can copy it, mimic
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we talked a
You
lot
have
of,
to
in
recreate
branding about being authentic, right?
yeah,
And so your marketing should be the outreach of your brand. And so you can look at the big guys to see what's working in their marketing, but just tailor it to so it's authentic to you, right?
right. Definitely.
And then secure your beachhead. So this is another military term, which is why I love it.
Yeah.
But
So what does that mean, Rob?
so the Battle of the Beaches of Normandy, one of the deadliest battles in entire U.S. history, was a beachhead. So the reason that they wanted the reason that that was such an important battle in World War II was that the U.S. had to gain a place of operations in the European market so they could expand. And so instead of attacking the entire shoreline of France, they focused on one specific spot. And then once they got there, they could expand all of their operations. So this is exactly the same type of idea is you focus on one specific client. And once you secure that client, then you can start branching out into your secondary and tertiary markets. So how do we make this operational? I've said this a couple times, but I'm just recapping. First, we set our strategy. Our strategy is the battlefield that we're fighting on. It's exactly how we plan on defeating our enemies in the scenario, which we've already talked about. Not all of our competitors are enemies, blue wave, red wave, all that stuff. But it's how we're going to win. Our brand is telling our customers what we do and what our promise is to our customers. More effectively, Simon Sinek's start with why. It is our why. Our marketing is the moves we make to employ our strategy and our brand. It's what we're using to actually bring people in and tell people about who we are and why we're doing things. So then once we have those things down, then we can start with our beachhead markets and find blind spots in our competitors' marketing campaigns. Then we can ask the 7 questions that we'll talk about here in a little bit to build focus on who our clients are and try to understand them a little bit better. And then we can set our metrics. I'll talk about metrics here. So the first thing that we can do is becoming very focused on who our client is, trying to understand everything about them, whether it's psychological, physiological, or just the common demographics. The very first thing that I like to do is identify who we're talking about. One of the best things that you can do is create an avatar. I don't know how many games are in here, but that's what I always liken it to. First thing you have to do when you start a new video game, and it's been years since I've played a video game, but I'm sure it's still the same thing. but it's you have to create your character. I always built it out of the likeness of me, right? So I wanted to see me shooting people in the beaches of Normandy playing some game, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing here. If you set an example of who your avatar is in your head, it helps you answer these questions. So when I started Stretch Lab, the corporate gave us a lot of information about who our target customers were. So I knew it was somebody who was 55 and older, probably had some ailments, things like that, had expendable income, things like that. And as I started looking at it, I was like, damn, that is exactly who my mom is. And so everything that I built, I would first go to my mom and say, hey, how would you look at this? Would you identify with this? Would you use it? And so that helped me keep that avatar in my head. So once you identify who represents your target customers, then you can start answering the basic demographic questions. What's their age group? And the reason that you want to identify their age group is think of all the slang terms that kids throw around nowadays. I drove by a billboard the other day and it said something about the vibe, and I don't know what that means. So clearly that wasn't targeted to me, right? It was targeted to somebody younger.
You want to hear something funny? About a year ago, we didn't go to the fair this year, but last year we went to the fair, and we were in a line to get, I don't know, corn dog or whatever they wanted, some popcorn or whatever it was. But anyways, there was this young kid in me, and I asked him basically, are you in line? You know what he said to me? I'm not in queue. I'm not in queue. And I'm thinking, queue? Is he part of QAnon or whatever? But basically, yeah, why do you say, no, I'm not in line? He said, I'm not in queue because he obviously grew up with the internet. You know how when you print a job or something, or you wait to get in line, you're in queue. Well, stupid me thought he was talking about QAnon or Q, whatever. You're so right, though. You got to use that
I had a
language.
student similar to that. I had a student one time that told me I had nice drip, and it was a female student. I didn't know what that meant. I was about ready to send her to HR. I was like, I do not need a Title IX violation.
Yeah.
I still don't know what it means, but all the students assured me it was not something naughty.
Like your clothes, like your what you look like, your jewelry. It's like your drip. And the vibe would be like, if you're feeling really anxious, like you probably need a more chill energy and vibe than if you don't need something that's going to make you feel more anxious. You need something
Right,
to
right.
settle you down. So, what's your
Yeah,
vibe?
and Rob, this just a quick point though. When you talk about your audience too, like say if you're Mathis Brothers and you're selling mattresses to people, one ad does not reach everybody out there. If you've got a new couple who's just married, that wants they want a cheap mattress so they can sleep on it, all the way up to people, a boomer like me that wants the incline or wants the whatever on it. I mean, but every one of those ads have to be different to every one of those target audience. It can't be one for all.
Exactly. You have different products to fit different needs, and different age groups, different income levels are going to have different needs or wants. So you're absolutely right. Income is another one. A lot of these, I want to just be completely honest. Some of them have more of a presence in different types of industries. So not everyone has to apply to your industry, but I would suggest that you do your due diligence and make sure that it doesn't before you just assume it doesn't. So like income level, I also taught at a liberal arts university, and profiling was like a huge no-no.
Yeah.
And so this was a very difficult lesson to teach because you are kind of profiling a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Income, there's a lot of research that shows a lot of different characteristics based on the amount of income that you make. And usually some of those characteristics are education level. So if you have somebody who's making more, if you have a client base that makes more income, you can reasonably assume that they have more education than the others. Now, it's not always true. I want to
But how
clarify.
they determine that in the digital world is through aggregating companies that we use. And basically, it's by what pages you go. If someone's going to Forbes magazine or they're going to Wall Street Journal. And then when you also fill out forms, sometimes where you're applying for a loan online or you're filling out some kind of form, your income you think is not being, the specific amount's not being tracked. But if you're in a certain bracket, you get categorized. So when I run my digital video ad campaigns, I can tell you if it's a low income person watching all the way up to a higher income person based on we target the viewer behind the screen. So every activity behind your screen is trackable. That's how, even though it's not a precise science, but it's a higher level, you can pretty much determine, pretty reasonable doubt that someone is in a higher income bracket than a lower income just based on their searches alone.
Well,
Too, like if we think about Nate Hammond's, right? He's got a print magazine, right? Like it's very targeted, right? It's just to the neighborhoods or in that area it's being sent to. So there's automatically an income associated with it. There's likely an age associated with those neighborhoods as well, and the lifestyle and what their values are. Because you move around to like people, right? Like if you're wanting to become a millionaire, you're not hanging out and around, the people that are only making 40,000 a year, right? That's not going to get you where you want to go. By knowing who your people are, it totally helps you sell more of your product or your service because you're identifying this is where I need. This is what I want my business to be.
and one thing I'll say is it's very uncomfortable to ask people what they make. So I would not put this on a. I mean, you can put it on a blind survey where people might feel a little bit more comfortable, but I would not sit there and ask every single one of your customers, so how much do you make? That would
Yeah,
be
I mean
illegal.
the nice way to do it is like here's the salary ranges,
Right.
right?
But one thing you can ask is, what's your job? What do you do? And that can be a good determinant of what type of income levels they have. So if you have a lot of people that say they're CEOs or they're entrepreneurs or maybe they're nurses or something else, you can start anticipating what their income levels and education levels are. Lifestyles and values are a little bit more difficult to interpret because those terms can be subjective, right? So lifestyles are how they live on a day-to-day basis. Are they going to the golf course? Are they going to gyms? Or are they going to bars? What are they doing on a regular basis? And then the values are really tough to figure out. And these other questions will help you figure out lifestyles and values too. I always describe this as think of the values of somebody in California versus somebody in Oklahoma, right? So we are in the Bible Belt. The majority of people in Oklahoma have some sort of Christian ties or something, and there are certain values that align with that, right? You go to the West Coast, they have completely different values. I went to California one time. This was 2000, well, longer ago than I want to admit, but I was hanging out with a former high school friend, and she was a bartender in California, which they actually make quite a bit of money out there. But she introduced us to all of her other friends who were also bartenders, and I started asking them because I was very focused on my career, still am. So my normal questions, like, what do you want to do? Where are you expecting to go? And they'd be like, oh, I'm just going to continue to tend bar until I meet some rich guy and marry him. And that. So just an example of the different types of lifestyles and values they have.
Well, at least they admit it, though, right?
Yep, exactly. All right. So once you answer those basic questions, and once you can kind of identify who your avatar is and their basic demographic information, then you can break it down into these questions. If you can answer these questions about who they are, then you can really stand out in front of them because people only buy, see if I can remember this. People only buy products for like three different reasons. Either they're afraid of something, they want to mitigate pain, or it makes them happy. And so these questions help you identify those three questions. So where do they hang out? Where are the places they are? Are they mainly online? Or do you have a bunch of introverted type of clients that don't want to go to the stores? In fact, you can look at this at men's retail. So there's a reason that there are no men's retail brick and mortars, because we don't like going. So the majority of me and my friends buy all of our clothes online.
Well, there's a very well-known restaurant here, and I won't get into specifics. Very well-known, has a chain of restaurants, and the couple that own it, if you want to really reach them, you'd find them every day on the pickleball court, because they're so prominent on what they do and where they go, and so we may think that they may sell something very, I don't know, it could be very, very stoic or something that you wouldn't think. You say they're in the tax advisors, where they get into details and stuff. But on the flip side, their social life, they are pickleball players. So strategies to find those people that have those interests is really a major key as well. Trying to really break that down.
I've got 2 points on this. I'll try to get through them quickly. The reason that loan officers at banks make so much money, it's because they want them to be able to hang out with other people that have money. So they want them to be able to afford to go to the country clubs and, the golf courses and stuff like that. That's why they say that more deals happen on golf courses than anywhere else. In Oklahoma, apparently it's more deals happen on lakes. It took me a long time to figure that.
You see what I said earlier, why I miss working for the man sometimes? Because you have those budgets, you have those expense accounts.
Yep. The other point, have you guys ever seen Better Call Saul? Spin off of
I haven't watched it, but I'm going to.
Oh man, it's so whoever wrote that is actually like a branding marketing genius, because Saul portrays a character who's great at it. But there's a scene where so Saul is the attorney that helps out the two guys in Breaking Bad when they get in trouble, right? And so Better Call Saul's like his origin story. And there was a time where he decided that he wasn't going to do criminal law anymore. He wanted to focus on family law because he needed to get paid. And he starts visiting. He has a bunch of clients that are in, I think I called this an old folks home, and I was told that was a little incorrect. Retirement center.
Yeah, careful. That's my next place of residency. Go ahead.
So he gets a bunch of clients that are in a retirement center, because those are the type of people who are looking into creating wills and trusts and things like that, right? So as he's at this retirement center, he finds out that the retirement center is price gouging the medication. So they're charging like $50 to $100 to administer an Advil or something like that. And he starts talking to a lot of them about this and figures out that there's a class action lawsuit against this retirement center. And they end up barring him from the center. They won't let him in anymore. But he spent so much time with them, he knew that every day at 2:00, they gathered around the TV to watch Matlock. And so he took out a commercial or an ad space at that 2:00 time, super cheap. Everybody was telling him, nobody watches TV at that time. He said, but my clients do. And so he ran his ad, and it was all about the pain of being taken advantage of, because most of those people are on fixed incomes. And the entire ad is very targeted towards them, and he ends up getting a bunch of calls. Yes, it's a nonfiction story, but it's brilliant, right?
Well, it's comparable to, like, I saw this comedian today. I don't know if you guys seen this, but he talks about the type of people that watch Jeopardy as to the people that watch Wheel of Fortune. So the Jeopardy person, I'll take exotic animals in Africa for 2,000, right? Something crazy like that. That's Jeopardy. On Wheel of Fortune, I'll buy an L. How about I'll try a B? You can imagine who watches Jeopardy, which is probably I can't answer even the 8th grade questions on Jeopardy, but me and Dee watch Wheel of Fortune. But that you think about that, and that sounds stupid, but there is a different type of individual that watches certain different programs. I mean, it's just the fact.
Right, exactly. So, point is, if you can figure out where they're at, where they're hanging out, where they're finding their information, then you have a streamline. You have a way to get in front of them in a vacuum almost. So you can really stand out. All right. So when we started this, I said there's 3 reasons that you buy things. And the most prominent reason is because of pain. If you can find somebody's pain point and fix that pain, you're going to sell a lot of products. And so these next couple questions this next question is all about understanding their biggest pain point. So what keeps them up at night? What do they sit there lying awake at night, fear, and not being able to sleep? So if you can find their biggest pain, their biggest problem, or their biggest frustrations and create and develop solutions for those, people are going to be head over heels for you and come buy all your stuff, right?
I mean, I think about this in the consulting work that I have done for quite a while. It's go to market and brand integrity. And so the biggest problem, the biggest pain point that a lot of the clients that we service was Amazon. It was eBay. It was things, their products being sold on the black market for, pennies on the dollar. And so their biggest pain point was the fact that they were losing money by not knowing who their sellers were on Amazon, not knowing who their sellers were on eBay, or just people opening up a website to sell products that they didn't even have any idea who it was. And so that was the pain point of the solution that we were providing, right? Is identifying who their unknown sellers were so that they could take them down legally and kind of rebuild their brand. And so a lot of things, when you think about this area of what's keeping them up at night, it could be something small, like for new mothers with a colicky baby. I mean, it could be like they just want sleep. What's going to help their baby sleep? For an engineering firm that's, wanting to be front of the market, like it could be their biggest pain point is they have one working document and 5 people can be in it at the same time. Well, that's not what you want because the stuff isn't saving. Or Excel, right? If you are working on an Excel document with 5 other people trying to input data in, you need to be in Google Sheet, right? Or a Smart Sheet or something else, because that allows all 5 people to be working at the same time. And so
I've
like
been
these
there and it's
pain
incredibly
points
frustrating.
and problems and frustrations are different for each service and product that we sell and provide. And so it's not just, it doesn't have to be these big things, but if you're in a business and you're focusing on for what I'm selling, what's my client's biggest pain point, that's what you want to hone in on. It's not the big idea things, it's the smaller things that alleviate their everyday frustrations.
Yep. And I
Right.
think you have to, for example, a lot of people, and they need more revenue for capitalization. They need more revenue to they scale up or whatever. But I think you have to walk them back from whatever that stress point is, to walk them back, because there's probably some root causes, obviously, where they're at because of it.
Exactly. And I think I used this example the other day. I had a client one time, I was actually teaching at the university, and I just assumed because he was a startup, it was a winery out in Chickasha. I assumed incorrectly that he needed more butts in seats to sell wine. So I gave him a pitch based on getting more traffic into his winery. Come to find out, that was nowhere close. Actually, that was a problem that he had too many people coming in and he couldn't keep up with demand. So completely blew my entire sales pitch because I didn't do a good job of asking the right questions to understand his actual problems and pain points and just assumed what it was.
Sounded like a good bartending job.
And I don't know. I knew a bartender there. One of our students went to go work for him.
And that's one of I mean, a great point is like, what are you selling? Like, if you're selling, hey, come to my restaurant, like, and you are having a hard time making or producing or getting that particular dish, like, stop advertising that dish. Like, that it seems a no-brainer and it seems too logical, but at the same time, it's a huge miss. If we're, if we have a steak on special and we can't get steaks right now, like, we need to not have that special. We need to
Exactly.
have a different one.
Well, that's a great segue to the next one is what do they secretly want? So these are the things that your clients may or may not be able to actually tell you. We used the example earlier about a mattress. So if you're selling a mattress to boomers who have a lot of pain, have trouble sleeping, things like that, you're not selling just a mattress, just a place to go sleep. You're selling a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to figure out what their actual pain point is and what they secretly want. And these are the things that they may or may not be able to actually explain.
Yeah, and you'll
Yeah.
see that with like Bob Mills, and maybe they call it sleep centers now, and they'll have a chiropractor literally helping pitch this out because of this new vertebrae mattress or whatever. So you're so right with that.
Or
Right.
even the temperature regulation between
Yeah,
men and women.
right.
Yes.
That's huge.
You think of even, the barber. He's not really. I know the reason I go to the barber. I don't look at men's haircuts. I don't care what they look like. So I go to the barber because I want to look good to everybody else. I pay more money so they can give me confidence and tell me what to do instead of, me going into supercuts or something and getting a bad haircut. So we're already at 53 minutes. All right. The next one is similar to what keeps them up at night, but it's what are they afraid of? And so if you have clients that are very risk adverse, maybe they don't want to take the chance on losing money, then you can't put them in a risky portfolio, right? If they have trust issues, you have to address the trust issues and set up ways to overcome those and mitigate the trust issues. So you can change the way that you're approaching who you're trying to sell to based on what they're afraid of. You guys have anything on that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's in a lot of it's. I mean, Mindy knows about this a little more than I do, but it's all on personality type sometimes too. If you've got someone that's entrenched of being a real knowledge person, and you're not talking about the features of that product or the benefits, and you just really want to get in there and just, you're an action guy like me, you overtalk them, you're never going to sell them because it's the way they consume information. I think that's another whole topic we'll address, but I think I'm correct. Like you use the DISC program, right, Mindy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what they're afraid of is it can be a number of things. And that goes back to number one, who are they? And don't assume, right? Because I think once you kind of outline all of this, you need to test it and see if you're right on the money or if you need to tweak it a little bit. Going back to the science experiment, you're in the midst of a science experiment for sure to try to figure out like, oh, maybe I was way off. They're not afraid. They have no objections to the price.
Right.
They're having an issue with if they trust the process. Like, are they going to get the value out of the price that they paid?
Exactly. We see that a lot with people who are targeting high income individuals. They have more money, they don't have time. And so a lot of, especially with Stretch Lab, a lot of what we were trying to overcome was not the price point. It was, if they take an hour out of their day, are we providing enough value for them to take that hour out of their day?
Right.
Who or what do they trust? So this is we can probably get on a whole political debate about this one, but I feel like we don't have to do very much deep diving because it's kind of every topic on Facebook at this point. But Do they trust the experts or do they trust the Facebook post or something?
Well, I think there's a huge shift in that though, right? Because influencers are making a ton of money on this. And we don't know them from Adam, really. I mean, they're in California or North Dakota or wherever. They're not anywhere near us, but we're like, those shoes look comfortable and you see enough reviews and they could be completely false reviews, but we go ahead and buy them,
Right.
right? That referrals are huge in most of our businesses. And so where are those referrals coming from? It's most likely friends or associates that they've had or an association somewhere down the line. But reviews play a big role in that. But I mean, the influencer industry is strong if you're selling a widget, if you're not
Yep.
selling a service, to find those people.
My sister is a nurse practitioner at the ALS clinic out in Oregon, and she's always upset. She texts me and my mom every time she's upset with her job, and a lot of it is people come into her saying, well, I read that I Googled my symptoms or I put my symptoms into Chat GPT and this is what they told me to do. And her favorite response is, well, where did Chat GPT get their medical degree?
Yes.
Well,
But I have to explain to her that like the entire industry has a bad perception at this point. Whether that's earned or unearned is irrelevant.
well, you think about
It's
all the questions you have in front of us right now. People can use that for bad as just we're trying to teach people to use it for good. People can use that for bad too, because they're going to somehow answer these questions for a certain group of people based on their fear. They have an answer for that based on where they hang out. So all of a sudden they look credible because they're and Mindy, getting back to your point, whether they're a false prophet or not, false a business, they could give the perception in some ways they're meeting some need. I don't know what, may not be the outcome of the product or the service, but some ways that initial engagement, they're meeting the buyer's need.
exactly. And this is why we want to spend so much time on building your brand, because your brand helps you identify that credibility. And so, moving on, because we're actually at the hour now, and we still got 2 more slides to talk about.
Okay, we can go ahead.
Okay. The next one is how do they make decisions? So you talked about DISC, and DISC is the 4 different personality types that exist. And, Ds are dominant, which I happen to be a D. And let's see, DISC. I don't remember what C
I is
stands.
influence.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't remember.
I can tell you
Steadiness.
bank. I use bank, which is simple, but go ahead.
And C is conscientious.
Yeah, I could tell you. So I read a book called Surrounded by Idiots, which is basically DISC, but it's red, blue, yellow, and green.
Yeah.
Either way. So dominant people want to make very quick decisions because they're always moving, right? Which one is the analytical?
That's C. That's a conscientious.
Yeah, so they want to dive into all of this very specific details before they make a decision.
Yeah.
And so it's the difference between emotion and logic. Do they value their time more? Do they value making the right decision more? So like a conscientious person, I happen to be both, so which is a rare combination. But
Yes.
so I can speak from both. This is why I'm using them as the example. But
Yeah.
the conscientious person values not looking wrong more than anything. So they want to
They
make
need all
sure.
the data.
Yep, they need all the data. So at that point, there's a couple of really good books if you want to dive into them. I really like Surrounded by Idiots. I thought it did a great job of explaining the different personality types. I'm sure, Mindy, you have some DISC books that you like.
Yeah. And we can share all those in a handout as well.
Good idea. There's also Sticking Points that talks about the different generations and how they make different decisions and why they make decisions the way they do. That's pretty interesting. All right, so what you do with this is you set your avatar, you answer these questions about your beachhead market. Your beachhead market is the people that you want to target right out of the gate. Remember we said you want to set them up so you start moving with that clientele first. And once you get to a point where you can take on more clients or you can expand your market, then you can start focusing on your your secondary and tertiary markets, but not until you secure your beachhead market first. And so at the very beginning, we talked a little bit about, I had somebody who said they get so focused in on their primary targets that they let the other ones walk. And that's when you start realizing you're doing that, is when you can start building out your secondary and tertiary markets. As you start to survey more people and talk to more people, then you start realizing maybe you overlooked a market, maybe you did those things. Those people can become your secondary and tertiary markets. And what I like to say is that 70%, and this is all relative to industry and stuff like that, but if you want a good rule of thumb, 70% of your marketing material needs to be directed at your primary market. No, 50% of your marketing needs to be directed at your primary market. About 30% needs to be directed at your secondary market. And your tertiary market, those are the people that maybe you don't know a lot about, but you know they're coming in the door. Maybe they're not the best client. So your primary market is ideally who you're trying to reach. Your secondary market is somebody who can use the benefits of your service, but maybe they're not the specific best person for whatever reason. So when I worked at Stretch Lab, our primary target was 55 and older with an ailment, because they had the time to come in, they had the money to spend, and we were the most beneficial for that target. Our secondary target were like high level people, CEOs, CFOs, owners of businesses, and things like that. They have more money, but they don't have as much time. So the only reason that they weren't our primary target was because they were harder to keep around, quit sooner because time was their biggest issue and things like that. So even though they were probably a better client, they didn't stick around as long. And then our tertiary market was high schoolers. They didn't have money. We provided a lot of value for them. We just didn't understand them enough to really satisfy their needs, but we knew that they were coming in. And there is a chance that it catches on somewhere, and all of a sudden our tertiary market becomes our secondary primary market. It's just you have to be able to be agile, like we talked about, and shift quickly and change your, like you said, it's a science experiment. So make sure you're tracking those metrics, and when they start making more money for you, then you can change. Man, this is where it starts getting complicated. All right. So my point is, do this for your beachhead market. And then if you're somebody who has enough bandwidth to take on more markets, then you can break it down in your secondary and tertiary. Then we get to our TAM, SAM, and SUM. So this gets a lot more complicated. This is where data starts really becoming important. And there's so many ways to do this. But you guys gave a really good example about Quentin, who is part of our NIA group. He talks about this all the time. Whether he knows these terms or not, I don't know, but he does a really good job of explaining it. Quentin does sales for a radio company, Bot Radio, right?
Bot Radio, right.
And he talks all the time about there are, I think you guys said 1.2 million people that are in range of his radio station, so they can pick it up, right? But of those 1.2 million people, only I forget what he says, 10, 20% of those
3%.
people actually...
3%.
I'm sorry?
3%.
Only 3% of those people actually listen to bot radio. And then of that, only a specific percentage of those people are going to buy whatever product you're advertising on his radio station, right? So your TAM is the total amount of people that you can reach. So that would be his entire Oklahoma City market. SAM is the serviceable available market. These are the people that actually listen to the radio station, the people that we can actually serve. And then SUM is the people who listen to the radio station in his market who will actually buy. Now, the reason we break this down like this is because we want to make sure that our metrics don't disalign with the market that we're advertising to. And so if you're somebody who works in a certain geographic location, like Quentin, who works only in the Oklahoma City Metro, it becomes very easy. You can pull things like the census data and stuff like that to see how many people are there, right? Then when I usually like working this backwards because it's very hard to track unless you have done this for a long time. But your serviceable, obtainable market are the number of people that you can actually sell or how many people you need to sell to hit your budgets. So when we start talking about the pro forma, we can take the amount of people that we need to sell and then backtrack it to see if our market fits. So if you need to sell 1,000,000 units and you know your TAM is only 1.2 million people, there's never a chance that you're going to sell 100% of the market.
Right.
So you know you need to either expand your market or become more targeted. How much more do we need to explain about this?
I think it's pretty good. I think it's just that if they want to take a deeper dive, obviously you'll be going over it during the meeting, but also it should be available to you and Mindy both to take a deeper dive, like we mentioned before.
Yeah, I'll tell you that there are people that make a lot of money every year that this is their only job. And so it's a little intimidating because you are starting to put real data to what you're doing, but it can save you from making a huge mistake like launching a product in a market that you can never fulfill. There's a guy that I know that launched several restaurants in a market that was never going to be able to meet his budget. So they all ended up failing. He had to sell them all off.
Well,
And I think I've worked with before that. I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
Of brands that I have either worked directly with or have consulted that are like, hey, for one example, I guess K&N Engineering, they have a huge following, huge loyal base. It's a air and oil filtration product, and they were like, hey, we should make wiper blades. We should brand wiper blades. And it's like, and compete with like, I mean, or floor mats. Floor mats were a big consideration as well. And it's like, we can't compete with WeatherTech. But we have a brand following. You might have a brand following, but it's not necessarily a smart business decision to diversify in when like the market share is strong and you just can't compete.
Right, exactly. So I guess the takeaway would be your TAM, if you're in a geographic location, is very easy to figure out. Use Census Bureau, stuff like that to figure out who you're actually reaching. If you're doing marketing online, you can look at the number of people. If your people are on Facebook, we get a whole debate about who uses Facebook, who uses Instagram, and stuff like that. Your TAM could be everybody who uses Facebook, or it could be the amount of followers that you have. So if you have 1,000 followers and you're only marketing online, those are really the only amount of people that you're going to use that are your serviceable available market. And then of the number of people that are your followers, how many of them are actually going to buy your product? And that's going to be a much smaller number.
Yeah. And I think under the
reverse that,
just quickly on the serviceable too, is that it depends. Like, Quentin has 3% of the market share, but he only has so much airspace available, which they'll talk about scale. He'll peak out because there's only 24 hours in the day. Secondary, you talk about close rate. I mean, what's your close rate of that 3%? Then the other thing is what is the average close rate in that industry he's in? So there is a lot of variables of that serviceable. Then the other thing is increasing that 3% to 4%. How do you do that?
Right.
So, which is a lot of strategies, obviously.
Well, and then if you want to take a deeper dive into it, to your point of figuring out all the metrics that you want to watch, the next level is the way to do this as a guerrilla warfare expert. And so much of it is being able to set your budget track who is actually coming into your business, who is utilizing your products. But there's also other metrics you can track. So you were talking about one of your clients earlier, Clayton, that only tracks number of new people
Customers.
walking in the door, I think,
Right.
which is a great metric to track, but they didn't take it to the next step of understanding where those people are coming from, right? So, like I said, I reverse engineer a lot of this. So I set my budget, I figure out how many people I want to sell or I need to sell to hit my goals. And then I will backtrack. Okay, if my cost per lead, which is CPL, is $5 and I need to sell 100 people, that means that I need to spend $500 in my ad campaign to reach those number of people, right? So to break this down in an easier way, you need to track the amount of money that you're spending in your budgets on your ad spends. You need to determine how many leads you're getting from those ad spends, and then how many people actually buy. So this is your TAM, SAM, and SUM. The metrics that I would watch are your cost per lead. So if you put $5 into an ad spend, how many leads are you actually getting out of that $5? And then the next is your close rate. So this was what your client was doing. Of those leads, how many leads do you have to bring in to reach one sell? And this is, if you divide those up, then you get your close rate. And then your cost per acquisition is how much do you spend to actually make a sale? So you've got your cost per lead, how much does it cost to bring somebody new into your door? And then your cost per acquisition is how much do you have to spend to actually get a sale? If you understand those metrics, then you can start really setting your budgets on what you need to do. And Mindy, you brought up a good point earlier before we started this of when people start losing money, the first thing they want to cut are expenses, and usually it's their marketing budget. But if you are armed with this type of information, then you know that if you cut out your marketing budget, you've got no more leads coming in the door. You can track how much money you're going to lose over time.
Yeah.
I will say this does get a little bit more advanced and it does get a little bit more complicated. So once again, if you have problems with this, reach out to one of us. This is the stuff I get super excited about. So
Don't go to Rob if you want creative.
yeah, don't go to me if you want. I'm not the creative guy, but that is a good point. I am not the creative expert. You guys do a lot more on the creative side than I do, helping people put together campaigns. My point with all this is if you do a good job of getting this information down, this is the type of thing that you can go to a marketing expert like one of you two or Amy Singleton, who was part of the group at one point, and say, okay, this is who I need to find. And she can help you create the creative side of this, which is the actual output.
Yeah. This is take to that creative so they know how to better sell it.
But
Yeah,
you know, the home run is when you talk with someone like me and Mindy, and we talk to someone like you, Rob, that gets the analytical side of it and in the KPIs and all that stuff is. But if we can turn you into a creative person, watch out. You know what I'm saying? I've seen that happen before because people. But when they start to realize that they actually have some creative juices in them, those are the ones that you talk about the rocket launches. Those are people, because a lot of us have to convince people, we have creative people out there, but we don't have the back ends as good as we need it sometimes. Because it's all about deliverables. It's all about people want to see results. And if you don't know how to get that, I mean, they're just one-time buyers. They're not really customers.
Yep. And once you get, I mean, any of these steps are a better step in the right direction, right? But it's all about zooming out and understanding, okay, where are my clients? What do they need? What are they afraid of? And then looking at the TAM, SAM, and SUM and make sure that there's enough of those people within your markets that you can reach your goals. And then, okay, how much do I have to spend to attract those people? So it's all about zooming out after this and creating campaigns that answer their questions or creating products that fit their specific pain points and things like that. And like you said, that's when things really start taking off.
Very good. Well, I think, everybody listening, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mindy. But I think if you want a deeper dive into what Rob went over and what Mindy does, they both do some free assessments. The assessments are free. If you do work with them, obviously they're a business like all of us here, but they're kind of just whetting your appetite, getting us thinking about how we really should be looking at all our businesses. So thanks again, Rob. Thanks, Mindy. We will see you guys in the next video.
Good.
Thank you.